What's up everybody, Tom here with another video. In this video, we'll be covering the latest stock market news in the lead up to the US election and also super earnings week. And we'll also be taking a look at the buy the rumor, sell the fact events that continue to happen in these markets. There's a stock that happened on literally yesterday, and we'll be talking about that, the indices, and more. Stay tuned. So as we always like to do as a community together, we want to look at what happened over the last 24 hours to get an idea of what might happen over the next week or months. Now, I just want to let everybody know we'll be looking at our technical analysis thoughts on the S&P 500, NASDAQ, dollar index, and more throughout this video. And we've got some really great levels coming up, which could provide opportunity to you, the investor or trader. So in this case, what have we got going on? Well, yesterday Microsoft had its announcement and it came through pretty good. And of course, that means the stock went up. Apple, Amazon, Facebook, all of these stocks before earnings were all up in anticipation of that event. And it led to the NASDAQ being the slight outperformer for the day. NASDAQ was up 0.82%, while the S&P 500 drooped around 0.3%. And of course, the Dow Jones went down 0.8%. When we're taking a look around the sectors, again, it points to the XLK or the technology sector doing slightly better than everything else. And interestingly, we had a sell-off in XLI, which is the industrial sector. So we had a sell-off in the industrial sector, which is not really what we've been seeing necessarily over the last month. The last month's all been about utilities. Utilities month to date up 8.93%. Energy being the weakest, and technology being also one of the weaker areas. So people are a bit hyped and buying into the news event, and it leads to the discussion that we'll be having together as a community a little bit later on in this video. So week ahead, what's going on right now? Well, we know Microsoft did okay, and that's leading to buying pressure in Apple, Amazon, and Facebook yesterday. We also know that Super Thursday, being all of these events, is going to be the biggest day of the week in terms of mass volatility. And you're going to see that in volatility index itself. There's going to be a pretty large swing going on in the markets. Now, here's an opinion piece from MarketWatch, and that is that most investors now expect the US stock market to crash like it did in October 1987, and why that's good news. So it's interesting people write these articles on MarketWatch. So we go through some of the data here, and I think there's a few things just I want to cover. One of the things is that we know that most people out there think the stock market's going to flash crash or crash pretty hard. You can see it in the stats here that the probability of a crash is thought to be higher. Now, what do we know about nasty Wall Street out there, guys? We know that Wall Street doesn't like to create crashes when everyone thinks that it's going to happen. I think that's the premise of this particular article. When you're taking a look at actually when people expect that there is a fear of the crash being the highest, actually the returns have been the greatest. And if you take a look through also put call ratios over those years, you'll notice that a huge amount of puts were being put on the market in the US over the last couple of years of bull runs. In fact, they were opened at an astronomical amount compared to calls. Now, this is always open to interpretation, as it says down here, but it goes along with the idea that what everyone expects to happen often doesn't. Now, that does not mean that we aren't seeing a nice correction here, and we'll go through our thought process on that a little bit later. But it doesn't mean that we're getting the start of a 1929 event or 1987 just yet. Remember, a lot of this can be fixed, at least partially, with a stimulus. But don't expect the market to have like a great rebound before an event like that. It needs support. So if anyone missed our video yesterday, we talked about some great stats coming into the election and after the election, what we expect. So generally speaking, it's usually not super volatile coming into an election. However, when it is down or declined, there was statistical facts of things that would happen afterwards. And please go check the video yesterday if you haven't already. There's some great information there about this. In terms of the S&P 500 volumes yesterday, pretty normal volumes, just under the 4 ticker here, and nothing really to note there from a volume analysis perspective. We'll go into more of that probably after the election. What's more interesting is the fear index, or the VIX, and we can see that's broken through our long-term channel here at 30, easily gotten above it, and continued to move higher, which is showing fear coming into the election. So we are in volatile times. We hit a 33.7 to 0.8 yesterday, very, very high on the VIX, and we still expect this to continue up into the election. I wouldn't be surprised, well, our target has been 35, but it could be even higher because there is going to be volatility, there is going to be uncertainty. This race may be tighter than anyone believes. Put call ratio is very interesting. Look at this, 0.8. Lots of calls, it looks like, opened yesterday and a lot of puts potentially closed. So put call ratio dropped significantly, and this probably shows me one very interesting point, and that is that guess what happened yesterday? Microsoft had a good earnings announcement. What also happened? Apple went up ahead of the announcement. Amazon went up, Facebook went up, the FANG stocks were going up generally. What does that mean or tell me? It tells me that retail traders like you or I are opening these positions. We are opening calls in anticipation of the potential buy the rumor, sell the fact event. We've seen this a few times. Let's take a quick look at AMD yesterday. An announcement came out, relatively good. Overall, people like Cramer think it's great. They think it's amazing. We see the stock here 4% down yesterday, 78.88, and after hours a little bit up, a smidgen up after the earnings report. But if we go back over to AMD, look at this, a run up into the event, and we laughed about this a little bit on the Monday live stream when we were doing it, and we said it could be very close to a buy the rumor, sell the fact kind of event. So it got to an 84.82, and then now it's trading at 77.67. That's a significant decline since the beginning of the week. What makes this even more scary is if you think about this as a pattern overall, it's a very significant level down here at 74.30. Some people would call this a head and shoulders, where you have the left shoulder, the head, and the right shoulder. And either way, if you get through this zone down here, it's going to be a significant point. And if you take the distance of the head to that neckline, let's say we're calling it the neckline, notice how it extrapolates out similar to back down to these resistances. So will AMD actually be a short-term sell followed by probably some good term profit or buying pressure? That's what will have to be determined. But it does show buy the rumor, sell the fact is well in play in the markets right now. I personally think AMD is doing really well at the moment and certainly smashing Intel. But it brings up the point that buy the rumor, sell the fact. It's a thing, and of course we need to be careful about making the right decisions leading into these events. Dollar index, very interesting here. We have a gap close up here on this particular data at around 93.14. We can see the resistance here on dollar index. This is US dollar for anyone that doesn't know what this particular thing is, the US dollar index. We've got support over here, resistance 3 times, and now we've broken up and through. And what we would expect now is if this holds above, we would expect it probably to move slightly higher, come back down, retest what we call a 1, 2, 3 touch, being 1 time, 2 times, and 3 times, and then bounce off and upwards to the 93.50, where it'll hit the 4-hour 200 simple moving average. This will bode negatively most likely for the stock markets around the world. When we take a look at the S&P 500 just a few minutes, overall, this will be a negative signal. Why is that? Well, usually dollar index strength has been a hedge against uncertainty in the markets. So let's now take a look at the S&P 500. S&P 500, I've got the pivots for the monthly up here, and we're about to see new pivots released very, very soon. I would be looking at this over the next month, especially after the US election. We've touched almost the R1 up here this month, and we've of course come back and sat on the central pivot. The central pivot is this blue dotted line here. Now we've noticed recently, especially the last 2 months, the central pivots, the R1s, the S1s, and the S2s have all been amazing buy, sell, support, resistance points. And I notice a lot of people make predictions on YouTube using these pivots, but they don't say where it's from. And that's because these particular pivots, they make sense. They're used in the market monthly in particular when you're trading stocks is the best. If you're trading currencies and commodities, consider daily pivots. They're really excellent as well. So monthly, weekly pivots, worthwhile considering in your analysis as indicators or tools. Right now, we're sitting right on that central around 3,400, and we may expect it to hover around this point. But remember, when we get the new opens next month, the market will generally gravitate either to the R1 or the S1 during that period. Let's take a look at the S&P 500 futures here. And I've drawn these 2 trend lines just to show you again as a community why I don't often draw trend lines that much. And I like the horizontal support resistance. Notice I've got this little trend line underneath here, and some people would certainly have drawn this trend line. And what happened was yesterday it came back to the horizontal role reversal level and where the 20 was. I like that level the most. Horizontal support resistance is my favorite type of indicator. Role reversal, role reversal, role reversal is something that's just so great as a swing trader or an investor. You find some amazing levels. We've correctly identified as a community this 3420 zone so many times over the last couple of weeks. And then we found that that was acting as support. There was a buy opportunity there. Then it closed below and that triggered selling opportunities. And we certainly have seen that play out on the US 500. So it's a great level there and pretty amazing overall. If we go back to the SPX just quickly, and remember we should be doing our analysis whenever possible on the real market, being the SPX, you'll notice that we're getting closer now to a 2050 cross on the 4 hour, and that is going to be significant because the last time it happened, it led to some pretty significant buying pressure. If we go to the 1 hour, the 1 hour has probably been the most interesting chart, and it didn't even quite get up to the 3420 in real market trade. So real market was mostly declining and just being held by those tech stocks in the buy the rumor, sell the fact kind of event. So we've got the 2050 cross on the 1 hour. We're expecting further weakness here, 3400, 3420 acting as the resistance level. And when we're talking about where do we expect the market to come back to throughout this really declining period, well, we're probably looking at the weekly, and the weekly makes the most sense because the weekly 20 was supported once, it was supported twice, and what do we know? Generally, the third time's the charm. So 1 time, 2 times, 3 times. 3 times is going to be what we're looking at. So that's around the 3,310 area, and I wouldn't be surprised at all for us to come back down and test that and find buying pressure. So that's the next target for the bears on this particular market. If you're a bull and you're looking for opportunities to the long side, well, obviously if you're investing, you can average down and do all of those kind of things. But we're still really maintaining, we need to see above 3480 to see a real bullish momentum change. I don't think anything in between this range is going to be that key. And I'd be looking more to the NASDAQ as a lead indicator right now of sentiment each way. We know that the NASDAQ has the tech stocks in it. The tech stocks have run the markets recently. And this level here is where we're looking at. 11.6 right now should continue to act as resistance. We know that on the NDX that the 20 moving average has acted as a bit of a resistance point. It did even through this announcement. But if we get this buy the rumor, sell the fact again, Super Thursday earnings announcements are going to be wild. If they do the sell the fact kind of event, this level back down to the 11.4, and then of course every 200 points at the moment on the NASDAQ is acting as a support or resistance zone. So if we see a break up, 11.8 should act again as resistance. If we see a breakdown, 11.4 should act as support. These are the key levels in the markets right now that we're looking at together as a community. On to gold. Interesting to have the US dollar going up, which would traditionally mean that you would see gold weakness, but gold is holding, which shows again people are starting to move into uncertainty brackets ahead of the election. This hedging idea is coming through, and it's coming through relative. It's not coming through incredibly big or anything like that. If you take a look at silver, very similar in a holding pattern. Overall, I'm not really bullish or bearish. I'm very neutral on these two metals right now. And then after the election, we'll probably be looking at a lot of opportunity. I still really stick with this idea that as a community, maybe we want to be looking at shorter time frame opportunities here leading up. And then after the US election, we can start to make decisions based on the candidate that wins and of course the policies that win. So I hope everybody enjoyed this video. If you did, please remember to, of course, subscribe and hit that like button. And we'll be coming at you with a whole bunch of more videos through our daily content into the US election. We've also got a live stream next Monday and on election day to go through the financials. It is a fun time and a great event. So come and join us for both of those, as I think there's going to be a lot of fireworks into these announcements. Stay safe, everybody, and of course, I wish you all the best and hope you make the best decisions in the markets over the next week. Bye for now.